Today's presentation is called Designing Deceptions, and our guest is Dr. Matt Pritchard, who's coming to us from the middle of England. After getting a PhD in atomic physics, Matt left at Durham University. Matt left research for education, which is something many of us have done, although many of you are still in research. First, he worked for the education department at think tank Science Museum, and then he created his own company, a science communication company. He currently goes into over 100 schools a year, teaching science with really neat demonstrations, optical illusions, and other things. In 2021, he won the International Best Illusion of the Year contest. His illusion is called Phantom Queen, and it's a really neat one with chess pieces in a mirror. And one of the things that he'll be showing us today is how he designed that illusion. I'm really looking forward to that. Matt is also a professional magician, has been for 20 plus years, and he's in the Inner Magic Circle, which is an honor limited to only 300 people in the world. So are you ready to present, Matt?
I am indeed. Thank you all for joining us. And if you're watching it on the recording, welcome as well. As you've just heard, I love science. And so I've made this. You'll see lots of the things I'm showing you today are very much home crafted. So this is just a folded up pieces of paper. There's some Lego, and I love Lego. If we twist it one way, we start to see some shapes align. If we go the other way, we can see the word science coming into view. I'm going to switch to a second camera here. So I want to show you this. So if I was to line it up and we get the word science, and you'll discover together that I love mirrors. And so if I was to put a mirror here, we end up with the reflection, and that word reverse seems to sort of show the word sort of magic there. So we've got here two different views of the same object, and this is very much a theme in my work. I say it's a theme. It's more of an obsession of seeing things from different perspectives and playing with different things. So the talk today, I'm going to be showing you lots of different ways of viewing things, often through the reflection of a mirror. And I also want to share with you just a very simple tool of just constantly just asking the question, what if? What if we change a little detail and we can see what routes we can go down? So this is a very standard sort of lenticular type of illusion. Lots of artists over the years have played with this. This is a variation where I've just asked the question, what if? So instead of printing something out on that staircase, on that concertina, what I've done is I've just literally cut holes, and you'll be able to see that if I line it up one way, we begin to see the word left, and if we go the other way, we've got the word right. But what's nice about this is because this has been cut out, we can then start to shine lights through. So this is what happens when we put a spotlight on it. We end up with that sort of dual reality of the word right at the front, and then the shadow that sort of is the inverted shadow cast is the word left. But we can also put two spotlights there, and then we get the two different words left and right showing up. And this is what I've spent the last few years playing around with. I should say early on that when the pandemic struck, and for so many of us, we were locked up at home, this was my creative output. I spent a lot of time in my office making things. I go into schools and I do teaching, and schools shut down in England, and I couldn't do that. And so I started just playing with these very simple science and mathematical principles and seeing what I could find. And then thanks to social media, I found I could share them. So that was two different ways of looking at things. And I then asked the question, what if? What if you could do this with three different words? And so this was my solution to that. So what I've got here is an array of pyramids, triangular base pyramids, and I've got some colors on it now. If we were to look at it from a certain angle, let's just lower this down a tad so we end up with the word wow. And I can see that someone's already predicted that word in the chat there. So well done, our mind reader there in the chat. But this has got three sides we can view. And if I was to turn it round 120 degrees, and if we get the alignment right, we can start to see the word how there. And then, of course, there's a third side I can show you, and we end up with the word now. So we've got these three words built into this three-dimensional shape. And for me, these three words of wow, how, and now very much sum up what I call the wonder cycle. Science and maths is full of wows. It's full of things of beauty, things that surprise us, things that are counterintuitive. And I think probably for all of us on this Zoom call or watching the recording afterwards, we are attracted to finding the wow moments in life, those patterns, those complexities, those coincidences, those lovely mechanisms behind the scenes. And I love the wow, but I also love discovering the word or discovering how things work. For me, wonder is in the initial observation, but it's also in the understanding, the discovering, the curiosity, the trying to figure things out. And I think sometimes we often rush too quickly from the wow to the how. I know as an educator, sometimes we show something and then go, but this is how it works. And I think if we do that, we miss out on that liminal space, that gap between the wow and the how, that state of knowing and not knowing, that state of multiple possibilities. And so I'd encourage us all to dwell a little bit in that liminal space between the wow and the how. But don't stop there. I've included the word now here. For me, you look at something, you go, wow, you understand how it works. And then you go, well, now what can we do with this? Now, what can we change? Now, I wonder what if. Now, how could we help people with this discovery? And this then takes you on that cycle, this wonder cycle of going round and again and again. And I never had the privilege of meeting Martin Gardner, but I met him through his books. And as a teenager, just getting into magic, I particularly loved his mathematics, magic and mystery book. I read it cover to cover multiple times, and that was just full of lovely items of wonder. And I hope in our time together, I can share just a little bit of wonder and things I've been playing with. But before I do, just one sort of mathsy thing here. I love this number. This number is what we call an autobiographical number. It just describes itself, because if you look at it, there are 6 zeros here, and there are 2 ones, and there's 1 2. And there's 0 3s, and there's 0 4s, and there's 0 5s, and there's 1 6, and there's 0 7s, and 0 8s, and 0 9s. And so what we have, and this is where I'm going to struggle to get this. So we've got 6 zeros, 2 1s, 1 2, no 3s, no 4s, no 5s, 1 6, no 7s, 8s, or 9s. And I things like this, things, little quirky bits of mathematics and science, just put a smile on my face. And you'll probably find as we go on throughout this talk, my face just gets bigger and bigger as I start to smile, just as I share these things with you. I think one of the things that many of us in this community have a love for is ambigrams. And I'm fascinated with ambigrams, but I also love taking the 2D and making it 3-dimensional. And so let me share a few examples of things that I've made recently, just playing around with words. And so This is the first one. So we've got here the word true, but we can also animate it. And we can turn it into false, or we can reverse that, going back to losing the piece on the floor as we go. Let me recover that. And so this was one of the things I was just playing with, this idea of taking a word and another word and finding out what's in common between the words and seeing if I can find a way of converting between the two. So that's one way of doing it. And like I said at the start, I get obsessed by things and I then try and find different ways of doing that. So here's another version, just using this word again we've seen, but made in a different way. So I'm going to give you a top-down view here. So this is the word true, but if I lift it up, you'll see there's some cutouts. And if we flop it down, it then turns into the word false. So we've got false, which we can then convert into true. And all I've done to make this is just between these two words, finding the common lines between the letters. And if they were a common line, I would cut them out. So here we've got the vertical line of the F, and if I turn it over, we've got a vertical line of the T, and I can cut that out. And then I just had to sort of fill in the gaps where those things that didn't match on both sides. So that's true and a false in two different ways. Let me show you a couple of different ways. So using a different pairs of words, I made this. So this front and back, I'm just using the same principle as I just showed you of cutting out common line strokes and then replacing the ones that weren't common with black lines. So another pairing is this. In fact, I've got this actually with me, so we can see it. It's just, you can flop between the two and you can see the common lines there. And there's one other one I want to show you. This was going back to the left and right, and I'll just show you this. This is just keeping the common line strokes the same, cutting out the others, and then we've got this anamorphic illusion going on in the background to fill in the remaining ones. And so, like I said, obsessed by this wordplay, this finding patterns between things, and playing with mirrors as well. So let me show you probably the thing that got me started in this whole journey into creating optical illusions. So I'm going to show you a video, and I'll show you the prop behind it, and I'll tell you the story behind this. So let's just watch that again. What's really nice about this is the natural way your brain makes the assumption of seeing a mirror in that frame. And I'm not entirely sure what the sort of psychological mechanism is going on behind that. There's a few things at play. I think the first thing at play is when you see something like this rectangle here, naturally in our lives, things with a frame have something inside there. So there's an element of, we see a frame, we expect to see something within that frame. And then you've got that symmetric scene, those two cans, and in nature, it's very improbable to find two things so carefully aligned in symmetry. And because it's improbable, then I think what happens is our brain makes the assumption, well, it must be a reflection. And by using this, it sort of tricks your brain into making that assumption. See, it's like Linda's got exactly the same frame she just put in the chat as that, but she has a mirror in it. And you know what, Linda? I did have a mirror in this. And the story behind creating this illusion was my mirror broke and the whole glass frame dropped onto my bed, and my duvet had a pattern on it. And so this was stood up on my bed, the mirror had fallen off to one side, and just late one night, I just looked through the frame, and for a moment, it just tricked myself into seeing the mirror still being in there, because the pattern created that almost perfect reflection. And I made a mental note. I went, that's interesting. What could I do with it? It was gone midnight at the time, and so I just made a note. And the next day I went down my office and then made that video you just saw with the yellow background. And in order to make it, all I did simply was to put my camera on a tripod, and then looking through the camera lens and stretching my arm, I sort of drew pencil marks where I could see and where I couldn't. And once I'd done that, I then cut out the bits that were in view and the bits that should stay inside the frame. And that wasn't the best way of doing it. I'll tell you a better way of doing it later. But let me show you a few variations on that. So have a look at this. And then it goes horribly wrong for me. So what we've got here is, again, our brains are making the assumption, but I think this assumption is even stronger because the mirror moves and the symmetric scene is sort of all sort of ties up. So to make this, I had my frame, and I also got a piece of cardboard with a hole cut in it that matched the frame. Now, this is a slightly different piece of paper, but all I'm doing is I'm sliding the piece of paper along with the frame. And to get the timings right, I simply had to just tape this to this. So I just put a bit of gaffer tape underneath, and as it slid along, the hole moved behind it. And it just tricks the brain into seeing something that isn't there. And what's really fascinating, and I think I can see in the attendees, we've got quite a few magicians here as well. What's really interesting, I'll show you again in a second, but I want you to look again. Now that you know the cardboard is moving, you will see it move. In fact, I made such a terrible job of making this. I didn't even use a properly flat piece of paper. There's creases in it, and you can see the actual creases moving along. And I didn't support it properly, which is why it fell on the floor. And this is a great example of what magicians call misdirection. I think our attention is so focused on the moving objects, that hole that seems like a mirror, that you miss out on stuff that's going on in the periphery of your vision. And it's just a really interesting lesson in misdirection and an attention and perception. Okay, now it's challenge time. If you're watching live, I'd love to get your thoughts in the chat for this. So I'm going to show you an image this time. It's not going to move. And the question is this a mirror or isn't it? Now, some of you may have seen it before. If you do, just sit there smugly going, I know the answer. But if you don't, pop in the chat. What do you think's happening here? Is this a mirror or isn't it? And we'd love to get your thoughts here. You've just seen two things that weren't mirrors. What's this? Okay, we've got so far, first three answers is nope, no, not mirror. Quite a few things going on here. Okay, well, I'm seeing not just answers, but also reasoning behind that. So I think some of you are saying what I've done is I've been rather destructive, and I've cut my broom up. So I've cut it into pieces and then carefully lined it up with the middle piece removed. And because the line joins up, you you can't see the bit in the middle, and so your brain's then making the assumption, well, it's been obscured, and so there must be something in there, and the thing that must be in there must be a mirror because we've got the reflection. So that's one way of doing it. I can see some other people noticing that the lettering in the reflection, I'm going to see if I can actually make this a little bit bigger in real time. So the lettering here isn't reversed, and you'd expect it to be reversed in a mirror because you've got that left-right reversal going on. So maybe that tells you it isn't a mirror. Michael in the chat has just said, maybe it's a picture. Maybe it could be. Maybe what I did was I set the scene up with a can. I took a photograph of that, then went to my printer and printed out the photograph, stuck that picture in the frame, then got the can and put the can right next to its photograph. So it's sort of staring at its portrait. And then I take a photograph of it observing its portrait, and it all gets a little bit meta. And yeah, it could be that. I can see here there's a bit of discussion going on. What I love about this picture is I think, pretty ambiguous. You can make arguments in different ways, and your head ends up going round in circles, going, it could be this, but it could be that. And I think one of you's already got this. I think Richard has said maybe the letters in the can have been reversed. And well, let me show you this. So Richard is indeed correct. The back side of the can, I've printed normally. And then on the other side, I've just reversed the front side. And so we've got this reverse text on the front side, but the back is as you'd expect. And then let me grab my mirror out. If you were to see this, the reverse text reverses the mirror, which then corrects itself, which is then wrong, and sends your brain on this like massive like circular sort of going. I was like, oh, is it, isn't it? I'm not sure. And there was a comment in the chat there about Andy Warhol, and yeah, one of the reasons for using Campbell's soup tin is because of that famous painting by Andy, the pop artwork. And also, if you're going to find an image online of a soup can, pretty much Campbell's soup tins are the only labels you can find easily without crafting it yourself. So these types of little challenges is things that I spent a lot of lockdown making, partly just for my own personal challenge, but then just as a way to interact with people electronically and have some sort of communication that was stuck by the pandemic. Okay, I've got another challenge for you. So just playing with the idea of real or fake mirrors. What about this? Have a look at this. And what I'd love you to do this time is put into the chat, how many Red Bulls do you think I used to make this? So how many Red Bulls went into making this image here? And we'll have a look at the numbers. For those of you on the recording, I'll read out. So we've got someone's gone 3 Red Bulls. Lots of people agreeing. We've got Kate and John and Dan all saying 3. Five's coming through. Dan saying it could be 7. Linda Louise is going 4. You have to remember that I'm sneaky. Someone's already put in the chat that I'm sneaky. And if I was to give you a different perspective, someone's just, Vivian there has just gone between 3 and 7. I love the way you're sort of hedging your bets there. And yeah, this is what I did. It is indeed 7 balls. Every single one of those black frames is actually just an empty frame. And the scattered paper on the floor and the alignment of the red balls makes it look like you're looking at the reflections there. And Yeah, Michael's already put in the chat that that must have taken a lot of patience. And do you know what? About 2 hours into making this, I severely regretted my choice of scattered paper, because it was an absolute headache to try and get the alignments on this, even using the trick that I did. So what I haven't told you, and this is the way that would have solved me no end of trouble when I made that thing with the yellow background, is if you use a spotlight where the camera lens is going to be. So you set the spotlight up at the exact spot your camera is going to be, you shine it at the scene, you're going to have lots of shadows on the board in front of you. And when you've got big black frames, you're going to have some rectangular shadows on the board. That tells you exactly what needs to be in the frame and what thing needs to be outside the frame. And if you look carefully at the view I've got on the photo there, and you trace some lines where the paper has been cut, you'll see, you can almost imagine some invisible lines. They all go down and they all meet at a vanishing point. And that vanishing point is where the spotlight is. That vanishing point is where I then put the camera lens. And I don't need to then worry about the alignment, because I know the shadows have just told me exactly what the camera is going to see. And it still took me far too long to make it. I would have been better off just using a simple tablecloth. But I think it creates quite a deceptive illusion doing that. Let me show you another video, and you'll see where the link to what I've just said comes in. Now, this is a two-dimensional object, effectively, that has then been turned into a 3D illusion. And this was inspired by a Japanese artist I saw on Instagram who did these lovely interactive cartoon artworks. And I thought what you could do is you could automate this 3D effect, because when you draw a flat picture which is meant to look 3D, you will often, because of the perspective, you'll often have all the lines, the sort of vertical lines going into the hole, meeting at a vanishing point, which is where the supposed viewer of that will be. So what I needed to do was have a way of, in real time, changing the line positions of those vertical lines dropping into the hole. And my solution to that was very basic, as most of my things was just to use elastic bands, so stretchy black elastic. And what that does, you can see in this example where I've got my vanishing point where the camera lens is, as you move it around, they automatically stretch to create that line going directly towards the camera, and it effectively works itself. The challenge, though, I found was often when the bands were rubbing over each other, they would often catch and you'd have that pinging moment. And I managed to sort some of it, but it's still not as fluid as I'd like it to be. So again, it's a similar idea of using the spotlight as a way of tracing your perspective, this time just using stretchy elastic bands anchored at one point to fix your perspective, and then you can move things around. Okay, I'm going to show you another video now, and you're going to see it 3 times. The first time is you're going to see the magic effect. The second time is you're going to be let into my world. You're going to see behind the scenes. You're going to see how it works. And then the third time is you're going to realize it happens so fast, so I've slowed it down for you. And this, for the magicians watching, this is my version of the twilight effect. I remember reading as a teenager alongside Martin Gardner, Paul Harris's books, and he had some lovely effects where reflections turned into reality in a mirror. And so this is me playing with that idea. So this is your behind the scenes view. And I said it was quick, so let's slow this down. So what you've just seen is a self-assembling net. I was aware of this as just a quirky piece of recreational mathematics. If you have a net of a cube, and if you attach some strings to some sides and you pull those strings, the whole cube will start flat and will fold itself up and create that cube shape. And so I just had some fun playing around with that. And then the magician part of my head was going, well, could you turn it into effect? And well, in my head, the obvious answer was, well, this is just a great way of making something appear. You could have something completely flat, and if you had this, the inside painted black or use a black sort of cloth, you wouldn't be able to see it. And then the moment it folds up, you've got the colors on the outside. And as long as you've got your mirror and your cube in the exact position where that extra cube's going to appear, then you have a really rapid way of making something appear. And all I'm doing is, because of, at the time, the constraints of the pandemic lockdown, I was holding the mirror in one hand, and then I had a piece of string off the side, which I was pulling really fast, and then the whole thing would just sort of create itself. And what I really love about these things is using sort of paper engineering techniques and origami often find a way into real life applications. And NASA, for example, is really fascinated by ways of folding things up and then having them to unravel, and maybe even that self-assembling aspect that I just showed you with effectively a single pull of a string. And they're really interested because when they send satellites into space, satellites require big solar panels, and big solar panels require big rockets. And as we discovered yesterday with the SpaceX thing, sometimes big rockets don't actually make it into space. And so if they find a way of making those shapes smaller and they can self-assemble in space, well, that's great. And we saw an example also with the James Webb Telescope, where it was sent up smaller and those hexagonal gold-coated mirrors self-assembled through different steps. So this is just a simple example here of a shape that these engineers have played with. This is like a rose-like shape, but when you pull on two sides, it will unroll and turn into just this flat circular thing. So you can imagine this shape being in the sort of payload of a rocket launched into space, and then with very simple mechanics, you can just have it unravel and create this large surface area. So you've just seen me find a way of making a cube appear. What I want to talk about now is how you can make a cube disappear. And this started because I was having a conversation with one of the great friends of Gathering for Garden, and that's Mark Sedekapchi, and he showed me this this book here. This book, Optical Tricks by Walter Wicks, and it's just a lovely, he's a photographer, Walter, and he just creates these images of impossible situations. So we've got somewhat optical illusions, somewhat situations that couldn't actually occur in real life, like these sort of versions of like the sort of Penrose type triangles. The thing that caught my eye, though, was this here. I'm not sure if you can see it properly on the video, but don't worry if you can't, because that's kind of the point. This is an invisible cube. It's there's a cube there just in front of the cat, and it's been painted to match the checkerboard background. And in many ways, when I read something or see something, to help me understand how it works is I have to have a play and make it myself. And so this was my first attempt at making an invisible cube. So I literally just got a checkerboard pattern and put a cube smack bang in the middle and set my camera up, and then started drawing lines that sort of matched what should be there. And at first it was literally just me looking through the camera lens with a pencil drawing things. And over time I realized there are some sort of mathematical relationships between some of the things that could save me the guesswork. And so what I did was, let me show you how that looked sort of lined up. This is something I took when I first made it. And you can see in that initial position, it almost looks invisible. The lighting's not quite right. Over the years, I've discovered that shadows are my nemesis, and so I have to find ways to compensate for lighting. But just as a quick glance, it does look like a flat piece of paper. But then again, that magician part of me starts kicking in and go, well, what could we do with that? Can we turn it into something? So I'll show you this, and then I'll talk you through the steps that got there. So let's watch that again. So what we have here is we have an invisible cube. Now that could be used to hide objects underneath. And so what you could do is you could have your hidden Lego figures underneath, put a screen in front, and as you put the screen in front, you then lift the whole cube up and you reveal what was there. There's almost like an invisible cloak around the object. But as I was playing around with that, I sort of realized some of the things that gave it away are sort of these vertical edges here. Now, that's quite a discontinuity when you view it, and you will often see the corners and the edges more than the flat sides. And then chatting with my friend Steve Price is saying, well, why are you limited to using a cube? Why not sort of make use of the fact we've got these diagonal lines? Could you have like a different type of 3D shape? And so this is what I made. This is the cube. Generally it's a cube, but the edges, I've just used the natural lines, and that black line becomes almost sort of camouflage, and the same along there. And the top, I've got it so the black lines are on the edge of the cube, and so there is some extra natural camouflage in the shape itself. And I stare at this for a while and then realize, well, this back edge, I don't actually need the back edge if I can make it stronger. So what I then did was, well, I just reduce it to 3 sides. And then those are the 3 sides the camera sees, and that becomes quite a nice camouflage object to create something like this. So that's what you're seeing, is me just lifting off 3 sides of an invisibility cloak that I've made, just using a little bit of camouflage geometry to do that. And then something odd happened. I'd got my cube on my desk, and I'd got the mirror, and I sort of put the mirror behind the cube, and one side was invisible and the other side was quite visible because you've got the white side, and it looked a bit odd to me that you could see something in the reflection, but you couldn't see something in the foreground. And that got me thinking down different tracks. The first question I asked myself was, could you make a invisible cube that works from the front and from the back if you have a reflection in a mirror? And so this is what I made. This is now one that's invisible from two different perspectives. And when you line it up, and if you've got the shadows sort of balanced, you can see there's a darker shade at the back in the reflection, which I'm not too happy with. But I was genuinely amazed that what you could do is make something invisible from two different perspectives, just getting the geometry of all the different lines lined up correctly. And what you're seeing here is this is a top-down view of this. There's three yellow cubes there, and the black line is the mirror. The central smaller yellow square is the genuine cube. The one off to the top right, that's the ground that you're seeing, or that's the bit that's replaced by the top of the cube. And then I'm not explaining that especially well. And then the one on the bottom left is the bit that you're matching with the reflection. And so you've got two things there. And so we've got a question here. What's it look like? And this is from Roderick. What's it look like if you set something small behind it so you can only see it in the mirror? And what you've done, Roderick, is you've perfectly set me up for showing you this. This is the question that I asked myself. Let me show you this. So this is what I call the phantom queen. You've got a white queen in the reflection, but you've not got one in the foreground, and you've got that discrepancy there. This is using that same idea of having some sort of camouflage, that invisible cube, but I realized that I didn't actually need to use a cube, because if I was going to hide something, I effectively, if it's just a single object, I only need one surface. And so this is the shape that I started playing with. I had a trapezium shape here, and the one on the other side has a slightly different pattern. And if you get the alignment right, what you can end up doing is something like this. So you've got two viewers here. You've got the red viewer. They're seeing the wall. They can't see the chess piece because the wall matches what should be on the ground. The blue viewer, who's seeing it from the other side, can see the chess piece, and the wall again is hidden because it blends in with the ground. And so those two photographs, and I've highlighted it with the yellow lines, just show you where the walls actually are. Of course, if you've got a mirror, you can have a reflection. You don't actually need to have the two viewers. So this is what it looks like with a mirror. You've got this sort of virtual image going on, and if it's lined up correctly, you end up having the wall completely invisible, and just from one of those viewing angles you can see the chess piece, and from the other you can't. And my projective geometry skills aren't especially good, and I would really love, and maybe this is a challenge for one of the viewers, is there a way of, like, is it a general case that you can always find shapes that will match in the foreground and in the reflection? Or was I just really lucky? Did I just stumble across the one shape that does work? Well, I say stumble across, but let me show you this. This is me. These are all the sort of different printouts that I ended up having to go through to try and get a cube that is somewhat invisible. I just did one, took a photograph, changed a few bits, and then sort of altered it. And Roderick was also asking, could you have an object in front that then doesn't show up in the mirror? Yeah, you could. You just have to decide which side wants to see it, which doesn't, and with that flat wall, it won't make a difference. One will be hidden, one will be revealed. If you move it the other side, it just works effectively in reverse. Okay, we're going to have time for a bit more open question and answers in a minute. I just want to show you one last thing. We've used mirrors an awful lot, so this time we're going to play with refraction, and we're going to use some lenses. So I'll show you what I've got to start with. I've got a glass of water. Well, I will have water in here, and there's two letters, U and R. And if I was just to top this up, this gets me worried because a lot of water, a lot of tech all around me, but we'll see. And I'm clumsy. As a magician, I'm terribly clumsy. Now, this glass acts as sort of an imperfect lens, and what it's done is it's magnified things. So no longer can the U and the R be seen by the camera. If I turn it this way, you can see the U. The R has effectively entered into a blind spot. If I was to turn it the other way, the R comes into view and the U's not there. And so you can switch between two letters using this lens principle. But you can also move the camera around and just get the perspective changing. Switching letters over is a little bit boring, just one glass. So what I did was I went out in my garden and made this. So when you've got it lined up, when you've got a choice of different letters, you can then switch between the two. So I think technically it probably isn't actually an optical illusion. It's just sort of playing around with refraction. So someone's asking, so are the letters displayed from the back of the glass? So this is, again, I'm being careful. It's just a printed out piece of paper, and I've just got them like this, so it's just stuck around the side. I hope that sort of makes sense. And you can view it from one side, twist it, and you can see the separate letter. So you can do it with words, but then I also realized pictures would be so much more fun, and often in life bigger is better. And so I got some drinks bottles and I made this. So what you've just seen is effectively just this principle of two different views of something, one being magnified, the other being hidden away. But rather than go down this route of you moving between the two different perspectives, again, I used a mirror to instantly show you that second viewpoint. So it's the same idea. I'm just using that mirror to bounce and see a different section of the glass, which will then reveal a different section of the picture. And then you get this lovely, when you bring the mirror up, lovely extension of the picture, which is different to what you'd expect it to be. So what I'd love to do is just open it up to just some more formal questions. I've tried to keep a track of the chat that's come through live, but I'm sure there'll be lots of other questions that people want to ask. Once we've done that, I want to show you one last thing. And then I think if you still want to, and if you're watching live, we'll move into a bit more of an informal social gathering on a different Zoom call.
I'll explain that. There is a question from someone from the Q&A that I'm going to give you, but first I just want to say that this is one of the most active chats ever. It is full of things like wow and all kinds of variations of wow, like awesome and clever and amazing, and it was just fabulous. It was so entertaining and interesting. The question is from Suash, I may be pronouncing that wrong, Joshi. And it says, love to know what some of the resources, books that Matt recommends for learning to create physical small illusions.
Yeah, so in one sense, there aren't really that many sort of books with this. I've, to a certain extent, self-taught myself of just making things. I think often what I've done is I've seen an illusion on a grand scale. So I've read through a lot of sort of Victorian magic books and seen some of the illusion they've done and thought, well, could I do it on a much smaller scale? And often when you do it on a smaller scale, it becomes easier, because if you're making elephants appear, you can do it with something that weighs a few grams as opposed to a couple of tons. I have done something with Vanishing Ink, which is a magic company, and there's a video series coming out in May, and there's some more details of some of the techniques, the building techniques that I use. But like I said, it's generally, there isn't much out there in making sort of handcrafted things like I've done, and hopefully you can see that these are so basically made. These are this is colored in with felt tip pens, and it's paper, and it's sticky tape, and it's glue. And I'm not a designer. I don't have fancy graphic programs. Everything, all these objects I've made, and probably shock you, but I made on PowerPoint. Now, that's the limit of my graphic design skills, and I just print it out on a printer and just using the resources to hand. I just wanted to show you something that I literally made over the last couple of days, and this is something that is based on the Schroeder staircase. So this is a lovely little thing that you can view this way, and we'll have the panda at the top, and then if you were to turn it round, suddenly it's sort of at the bottom. We can also see a reflection here, and you can see the pandas both at the bottom and the top there. And there's an online journal called Journal of Illusion, which I know lots of people who come to these gatherings participate in papers, and there's a lovely one explaining some of the things behind this. So this is something just I've been playing with recently. I've just took the Schroeder staircase and extended it a little bit to create this this sort of dual reality of a panda being at the top and the bottom of things.
Very great audience, as well as great presentation.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So thank you so much, Matt. Thank you. It was just fabulous. Someone asked, did I miss a link to your website?
Yeah, quite possibly. I'm terrible at promoting myself, so I'm just gonna. My website's mainly aimed at schools, which is sciencemagicshows.co.uk, but my basically my Twitter handle, Instagram, TikTok, all the rest is just Science Magician. So yeah, Science Magician will get you to a lot of these videos you can watch again and again.
Okay, well, thank you again. I'm just amazed, and it was so fun.